The Crimson Key. Haruka Suzuki stood at the entrance of the old mansion she had unexpectedly inherited after her uncle's sudden death. The structure loomed over her, its stone walls worn by time, covered in vines, and its windows dark, like hollow eyes peering into her soul. Her uncle, a reclusive man she barely knew, had died under mysterious circumstances, and now this mansion, isolated deep within the mountains, was hers. The wind howled through the trees behind her, rustling the overgrown garden that surrounded the house. Haruka hesitated, clutching the iron key she had received with her uncle's will. There had been no mention of this house during his lifetime. In fact, no one in her family had ever spoken of it. The lawyer handling her uncle's estate seemed equally baffled, simply handing her the deed, a small envelope, and the key along with the cryptic instruction, "Everything will be clear once you enter the house." As she stepped inside, the heavy wooden door creaked, echoing through the grand but decaying foyer. Dust particles danced in the faint light streaming through the cracked windows, and the scent of mold filled her nostrils. Her footsteps were the only sound as she walked across the cold stone floor. The house felt abandoned, long forgotten, as if it had been waiting for someone to return. Her uncle Ichiro had been a man of secrets. He had few visitors, no close family except for Haruka, and neighbors spoke of strange occurrences surrounding his estate. She had only met him a handful of times in her life, but now, standing in his home, she couldn't shake the eerie feeling that something, perhaps someone, was watching her. Among the items left behind was a single small envelope addressed to Haruka. Inside she found a brass key, its surface worn but polished, with a note in her uncle's shaky handwriting. "Beware the Crimson Room. There you'll find the answers you seek, but not without risk. Trust no one." The message chilled her to the core. What did it mean? What danger lay in this mysterious room? Her uncle's vague warning left her with more questions than answers, but one thing was certain: there was something hidden here, and it wasn't just his past. Determined to uncover the mystery, Haruka spent the next few hours wandering the mansion, searching each room meticulously. The place was vast, with winding hallways, hidden staircases, and forgotten corners. The more she explored, the more she realized how strange this mansion was. Rooms seemed to shift and change, corridors that had once been familiar became distorted, and she constantly felt like she was being led in circles. Old portraits of stern-faced relatives lined the walls, their eyes following her every move, adding to the growing sense of unease. She found dusty old books, paintings covered in grime, and furniture long untouched. But there was no sign of anything resembling a crimson room. As the hours passed, Haruka began to doubt whether the room even existed. Exhausted, she found herself back in the foyer, staring at the grand staircase that led to the second floor. Something in the back of her mind nagged at her. A faint memory from childhood, a day she had visited her uncle with her parents. She had wandered off alone that day and found herself in a room at the end of a long corridor. The walls had been painted a deep, unsettling shade of red. Could that have been it? Driven by a newfound sense of urgency, Haruka ascended the stairs. The mansion felt alive in the growing darkness, the air thick with tension. She reached the top and walked slowly down the corridor, her eyes scanning the walls and doors, searching for anything unusual. The further she went, the more she felt a presence following her, a shadow lurking just beyond her sight. Her breath quickened, and the hairs on the back of her neck stood up. Something was wrong. Something was watching. Then at the far end she saw it. A door slightly ajar with red light seeping through the crack. Her heart raced as she approached, the key in her hand growing warm as if it responded to the proximity of the room. She hesitated for a moment, her uncle's warning echoing in her mind. Trust no one. With trembling fingers, Haruka pushed open the door. The room inside was like nothing she had expected. It wasn't just painted red. The walls, the ceiling, even the floor were drenched in crimson. The light in the room seemed to throb with life, and in the center stood a single object, a large, ornate mirror. Its frame was gilded in gold, intricate and almost sinister in design, and the glass surface shimmered unnaturally. Haruka stepped inside, the air heavy with something she couldn't quite name. The mirror seemed to beckon her closer, its surface rippling like water. She stared into it, expecting to see her reflection, but instead the glass revealed a scene, her uncle Ichiro standing in this very room, holding the same brass key she now clutched in her hand. Suddenly the image shifted. Haruka watched in horror as the reflection showed her uncle speaking to a shadowy figure whose face remained obscured. Their conversation was inaudible, but the tension between them was palpable. The shadow handed Ichiro a small crimson box. As soon as Ichiro took it, the figure disappeared into the darkness, leaving her uncle alone and visibly shaken. The scene grew darker, more menacing. Ichiro opened the box, and inside was a strange object, an old key identical to the one Haruka now held, but this one was glowing faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. The moment Ichiro touched the key, the mirror's surface cracked, and her uncle screamed in agony as he collapsed to the floor. Haruka gasped, stepping back from the mirror, but it was too late. The mirror began to crack, spidering across its surface with a deafening sound. The room trembled, and the crimson walls seemed to close in on her. Panicking, Haruka turned to leave, but the door had slammed shut. She pounded on it, but it wouldn't budge. The mirror behind her continued to crack, and from its shattered surface, a faint whisper began to emerge. Find the box or suffer his fate. Just as the walls seemed about to crush her, the door flew open, and Haruka stumbled out into the hallway, gasping for air. She looked back at the crimson room, but the door had vanished. There was no trace of the room she had just escaped, no red light, no mirror, nothing. Shaken to her core, Haruka knew now that her uncle's death was no accident. The mysterious figure, the crimson box, and the warning, everything pointed to a deeper conspiracy. The key still clutched in her hand hummed with energy, and she realized that her journey was far from over. Somewhere in this mansion lay the answers, but the danger had only just begun. As Haruka stood in the now quiet hallway, she could feel the mansion itself watching, waiting for her next move.